Hello, and welcome to the Professional Pivot. I'm your host, Maggie Ruby. Today, I'm very excited to bring you part one of a 3-episode series, which we are calling A Conversation with a Masterful Strategist, Annmarie Dixon-Barrow OBE. In today's episode, which I'm calling The Brand That Is Annmarie, we will focus on her story. In part 2 and 3 of the series, she and I will be joined by several impressive individuals of her global network that she has successfully helped and worked with. This will provide a further dimension of her work and how she skillfully charts the course. You'll definitely want to catch those episodes. As a reminder, and as we go through our episodes, please add any questions or comments you may have. Your opinions matter to us, and we will make sure to include in future episodes. So with all that said, I'm very honored to do an official introduction of our special guest, Annmarie Dixon-Barrow OBE. And quickly, it's important to highlight that she is an OBE, which stands for Officer of the Order of the British Empire. And an individual only receives this award in recognition of distinguished achievements and outstanding public and community services. As we move forward through this episode, you will undoubtedly see why she carries this title. Annmarie is a renowned executive coach, leadership advisor, and talent strategist, owning her own firm, Annmarie Limited, with her business being based in the UK. Having worked across the globe, she brings a unique international perspective to leadership and talent development. I like to describe her as a masterful people connector who truly is aware of cultural nuances and the importance of relationships and networking. She is a visionary leader and an executive search professional with a unique approach, which translates into incredible success for her candidates and organizations she works with, while always providing superior results. In addition to her company, she has also expanded her business acumen into the fashion industry and is the founder of Continental Clothing, with her business based in the Gambia, West Africa. She truly is a portfolio leader. Welcome, Annmarie.
Thank you, Maggie. How can I follow up your fantastic introduction? It made me sound really interesting that I wanted to interview myself. So thank you for that, Maggie. It was wonderful. As ever, you're always so generous with your kind words.
Well, thank you. It's easy to do when I'm speaking the truth. And I am very, very, very excited to have you on this episode. So, Annmarie, if you are ready, let's get to it.
Yes, I'm ready, Maggie.
So, you have spent over 40 years helping organizations identify and develop talent. When you look back, what was the moment you realized this was your calling rather than just a job?
I think it was quite difficult for me to identify a particular moment. I think I started in retail and I learned quite quickly that I was managing a niche boutique, and it was really important that you developed a rapport with your customers because it was the sort of business that people came back to. So for me, it started very early on in my first job in retail. And then I would say it moved to when I relocated from Leeds to Wales. And in Wales, I was given the opportunity to run a large charity that was looking at employment skills, training and development, business enterprise, and it was working with the local community in Cardiff. And I think that sort of gave me the spurt to realize that you can't just do it as a job. It is a vocation because you're working long hours, you're starting at 8 o'clock, sometimes with community meetings, different events, you'd be home at 12. And with two small children and a husband, you have to make sure that it is your vocation. You try and fit everything else in. So I think retail was my start, but moving into employment training and working for the charity sector in Wales.
I think that is terrific. And I think what you have also very smartly and strategically done is take really key disciplines and core skills from each of your experiences that also layered into what you have built to this day. I have a slight bias. I think that people that begin in retail really have a trajectory of just great success. Retail is hard, and but it also allows you to learn so many aspects of a business from, I mean, literally all the disciplines from sales to marketing to finance. You include the people skills piece into it. I think that's exciting that you launched it all from retail, and there's a fashion piece in that that we'll get to in a little bit.
Yes.
Um, so the professional pivot is all about turning points. So, what's a big pivot in your career story?
Well, I suppose again it goes back to my whole career history. So started off as a shop assistant, pivoted into marketing, pivoted
Mhm.
into working in the charitable sector and working with the Black voluntary sector, and then leapfrogging in a different arena to London, working at the heart of the business community. It was in the very early days of equal opportunities, and diversity and inclusion didn't really exist. So I see sort of everything I've done is a pivot that has led me on a road. And I'm still on that journey, but I pick things up along the way. So I wouldn't say it was one particular thing, it was my career to date.
Which is very exciting. And I think, the way that you've layered it and built upon it, intellectual curiosity, I've known you always to be. So I can see why, you would make adjustments and shifts and pivots continually. I love it. So, Annmarie, I've described you as a masterful people connector. And I truly believe that networking is one of your superpowers. You probably have a red cape on somewhere that I'm just not seeing right now. But people have also described you as someone who does more than just network, but truly connects people in a meaningful way. Where do you think that instinct came from?
I have to be honest with you. It comes from my mother. My mother was a great connector across the UK. She knew
That's
all
great.
the senior Black execs at the time in the Commission for Racial Equality, Equal Opportunities, and I observed her. I saw what she did. We never had much money, but I saw she spent a little bit in one shop, another bit in the newsagent. She would, back in those days, you went to the laundrette, you didn't have a washing machine. She'd go to different laundrettes. So she spread whatever she had amongst the community. And, I will talk about her quite a lot in the podcast because she was phenomenal. And I think that's where I get my networking and connecting. And when she died, it was such a shock to my sister and I because we're a
Mm.
small family. We said we'll just have a small funeral. And I actually got a call from the Sheffield MP at the time. And he said, I think, you need to think about where you're going to have your mum's funeral. And I'd like to open up Sheffield Cathedral for you to have your mum's funeral there. And my sister and I just laughed and said, You're joking. We only know a few people. Anyway, they persuaded us. And when we got to the cathedral on the day of her funeral, it was full and standing of everybody, Maggie, she'd helped in the community, from the florist to the newsagent, to the butcher's shop. And it was incredible. All the young people that she'd helped, because she worked in a similar industry to me. So that was the one of the best groundings that you can have. And I hope I've passed that on to my two children. And hopefully they will pass it on to my grandchildren.
I'm sure your legacy will continue through them. And I love the way you describe her. I mean, she sounds like an extraordinary woman, the way you describe her, inspirational and an incredible role model. But your observations of her, I think the way you described her, I could easily describe you. So
Yeah.
you've picked up those traits, and that's a great story. I love it. Um, so you're known to for having a distinctive style. So when you introduce people to each other, can you walk us through what that actually looks like? Like, what do you say? What do you notice? What makes an Annmarie introduction different?
I've got to be honest with you, it is not rocket science. And, and when you say what makes you different, I'd say I'm brief. Right. Every day I get numerous letters, emails, and they're paragraphs long of introducing me to somebody knows. And I don't have time. I have time to read the top line and then I'm on to something else. So I've always made it a policy that when I'm introducing somebody to somebody else in my network, it is one line. It's, I think you two need to meet. And if I say, I think you two need to meet, even if it's a chief executive and a young person, that meeting will take place. And so I think lots of people pad connections, networking,
Mhm.
they make it some mysterious thing. It's when the time is right to connect somebody, and you are just making that opening. It is up to them
Mhm.
to sell themselves, and equally the person who they're connected to has also got to sell themselves to somebody who's not part of the network. So it's not any book or sort of set of rules. It is direct and simple. I think you two need to.
Well, now, would you say that that's easily a powerful statement for you because you are so highly respected and connected and know so many people that, like Annmarie, if you told me I need to meet somebody, I wouldn't even blink an eye. I would jump on that. So I would assume that, people that are looking to aspire to do what you do, some of it takes a little bit of time to develop your reputation, I would assume.
I think you've got to be in it for the long term of your career. I've seen lots of super executives rise quite quickly, but they almost forget where you've come from. There
Yeah.
was, I remember when I first started working in London, meeting somebody called Sir Herman Ousley. And at the time, he was the chairman for the Commission for Racial Equality. So one of the most prominent Black people in the UK and beyond. And he once said to me, he said, Annmarie, you've really got to understand that when you're working in the London environment, it is very different to working out in the regions. And he says, never forget where you came from. And I've never
I
forgotten.
love that.
I have achieved a lot. I've walked in the House of Lords, the House of Commons, most senior corporate offices in the UK and beyond. I've either dipped my
Mhm.
toe in or connected into, but I've never forgot where I've come from. I don't assume just because somebody knows me that I can assume that I can actually step into their arena. It is very much brief connections that I make, and I never ask my network for anything. I always give. And that's very, very important when you're building up a networking career. Never ask, always give.
Always give. But great words of wisdom for sure. And I like the keep it brief concept. And stay true to who you are. I think is really great advice for everybody. So thank you for that. So, what are you really looking for in a person before you decide, like, I need to connect them with someone?
I think I'm looking for, well, first of all, I'm looking in their eyes because I think eyes tell you the truth. And if I like to hold someone's gaze, not for too long because I don't want them to feel uncomfortable, but the eyes tell me most of what I need to know. Then I
Yeah,
listen for elements of kindness. I listen for elements of a sense of humor and not taking yourself too seriously. Because
I
again,
love it.
we're all moving up the career ladder. And sometimes I'll say to my mentee, or my person I'm coaching, you're trying too hard. You just need to be yourself and
Mm,
you need to accept who you are before somebody can accept you for who you are. So I think it's very important that you stick to your original roots of who you are and don't pretend.
I love it. And I really do think that the eye contact, what do they say? Eyes are the window to the soul.
Yeah.
That you really can have an opportunity to read somebody like that.
And you'd
That's
be
just
amazed.
exciting.
But you'd be amazed, Maggie, how many young people can't look you in the eye anymore. Well, that was one thing I was told as I was growing up and in the world of work. When you're
Same.
speaking to somebody, you look at them, you address them. But I think we're in a stage of lots of internet, lots of social media. People message each other, but people very rarely communicate on video visually and actually look at who they're talking to. So to
Yeah.
me, the eyes always have it.
Yeah, I love that. Eyes always have it. But I think it's the technology component that people don't interact in person with individuals as much as we did. And so I think that there's, and I don't want to say social awkwardness, but there's not that same level of comfort of being able to walk up to somebody and have a conversation with them or to be able to work a room because they're just not around. They're not in that environment that often.
It's so important because the art of communication is what makes networking happen. And if you
Hmm.
can't communicate verbally as well as written down and every other media, then verbally is one of the most important. And I think it's very important that schools and universities and even places of work bring
Hmm.
back the art of conversation. It's something that I do a lot with some of my clients is just get groups of executives together and get them to talk to each other,
Yeah, no.
and you'd be amazed at how many execs don't talk to each other. They'll send an email, and
Hmm.
back in the day, I'm showing my age now, people would send a memo, but actually that face-to-face human contact and conversation is key to having a good networking career.
It's tied to networking. And I was just reading an article recently that was talking about, really how to, for any of our listeners that are looking to make a pivot into and land a new job, for example, that, now everything is AI driven and the bot really kind of not even keyword searches anymore. It really kind of interprets your resume. And so the real advice that I'm giving everybody and that I've heard be given is that, warm contacts, referrals, communication, network is really how people are successfully landing jobs these days. So
Yeah.
I think everything you said speaks volumes. So is there a connection you made that you're especially proud of and what's come out of it?
Well, I'm looking. at my most successful connection is Maggie Ruby, and we've known each other for a long time from the day we met, Maggie. And I
Mhm.
remember because you were at the top of Time Warner, surrounded by the great and the good. And one of your colleagues called me because they knew I was going to New York. And they said, I want you to meet my boss. And it's very rare somebody says that. And I arrived in New York. We met up. I went to your beautiful offices. And from that day, Maggie, your connection has been the one that has been most rewarding. It's given
Oh,
me a friend for life. It's given me a superb business exec that I can look up to. And there's very few people I look up to, but the way you ran your international recruitment and the in-house, everything about that rocked my boat because it was so different to any other company and to any other recruitment agency. And you had a team that cared, and they cared because you cared. And
oh.
that also introduced me to Dick Parsons, your absolutely megastar chief exec. And I
Mhm.
will never forget our connection, Maggie, and the world you opened to me by introducing me to Dick Parsons. So I couldn't have found a better network.
Oh, I am extremely flattered and kind words. Thank you so much. That means the world to me coming from you. And I mean, there's no question. As soon as I met you, I had the same reaction in terms of I knew it was going to be a friendship for life. But you opened up a lot of mindset and introduced me to people that I never would have had the opportunity to do. So it was, I think, a very exciting mutual connection between the two of us because
Yeah.
you really benefited me in so many ways. And then I do think that, the Dick Parsons connection, if you don't mind, I'll tell a little story. But you had done your first Black inaugural event in the UK. And Dick Parsons flew to the UK to be your keynote speaker, and it was so exciting. And then you had mentioned that you've been through the House of Commons, House of Lords. If I remember correctly, you toured him through there, and he was very excited because he got to sit in the chair that Winston Churchill got to sit in and smoke a cigar. So that was one of my sweet
And
takeaways.
he was such a legend because going into the House of Commons and the House of Lords is quite a rarity, really, because it's going into our government is live and there. And Dick was so humble. The
Mhm.
guy on the door, do you remember, recognized him from
Mhm.
America, and they had a little riff. And so he was the doorman to the House of Commons. And Dick humbled himself. And that guy, when I used to go in for years afterwards, he always remembered that moment. When remember we took Dick all around and he got to do all the things he wanted to do. And then we decided to go not into the fancy dining room, but we went into the
Yes.
tea room of the House of Commons with all the MPs, all the staff, and Dick got behind the counter and helped the team serve everybody tea. Now,
Mhm.
that to me was so precious, and I would never have experienced that. The Black inaugural dinner, um, Dick actually making a difference with all the Black execs that were at that dinner,
Oh,
all
yeah.
the execs from Time Warner. But Maggie, you made that happen. And so I know you're being very shy about it and very humble, but you made that happen and you drove that. And it was a lifelong relationship. I remember flying into New York a few years ago before Dick got sick and having that wonderful lunch. And
Yes.
so I will always be in your debt for
Oh,
being my favorite networker, and you brought somebody into my world that I will never forget. And my
Well,
network will
I
never.
love it. Well, and yeah, he was the people's leader, and I think we all benefited from being in his orbit.
Yes.
One of a kind for sure. Um, so, how do you keep track? Not to just jolt into another conversation, because I think we could talk about our network connections for a very long time. But how do you keep track of the web of people in your world well enough to know who should meet whom?
Well, in a way, I suppose I've always been a little bit nosy. So I track people. I track people through newspaper articles. I'm involved in quite a lot of networks behind the scenes, LinkedIn, lots of different bits of information. And I will track somebody's entire career from the moment I help them into their first job. I might not speak to them all the time, but I'm watching them. I'm seeing them develop. I'm seeing them grow. And when an opportunity comes up, I will then go. But I could wait 15 years for that opportunity. And actually, I've just placed somebody into a chief human resource officer role that I have known for 17 years, and I've waited for the right role. The right role came up, and she went through the whole process. But as a recruiter and a headhunter,
Hmm.
almost who's going to get the job. And so she was very successful. It was sad for the other contestants that didn't get through, but she was a star. And she'd been in my orbit for 17 years.
I think that is an extraordinary story. And earlier you mentioned that you really need to be in it for the long term. But it's also got to be exciting to follow people's careers. I think that is one of the true standout elements of a really leader in executive search. You pay attention to those things and then know
And
when
you,
you can connect the dots.
yeah, and you never get somebody a job. You open them to an opportunity. And if you, as the recruiter, have done your homework, then at least the people that you're putting up on the shortlist, all of them can do the
Mhm.
job. And I always say that to my selection base is that all of you can do the job that you're going for, but it just depends whether it's a cultural fit. It's not the skills fit because your skills are there. And
Yeah.
not everyone out of a short list of five can get the role. So I am quite honest with all my candidates through that process.
Well, and that again builds that respect because I think you do to benefit them. You shoot very direct with them so that you position them in the best light,
Yeah,
which
yeah.
is terrific. And some people you've kind of touched on this, but I thought maybe we could expand on it a little bit more. Some people network for personal gain. You really seem to do it almost as a craft or a gift to others. And you kind of touched on this. How do you think about the generosity of connecting people?
I To me, it's just part of my world. It's part of what I've always done. So I don't actually I never really think about it. And
Mm,
it's only now when I'm looking at my two sons and I realize they've got it, and I see how they move around, network and connect. And again, I think I don't think you can teach somebody to be a good networker. You can teach them to be open, honest, and how to communicate. And if you give them some of the tools that a networker requires in a box, then
hmm.
they have to almost make their own way with those tools. So there isn't, I've seen lots of books on networking and connections, and they're great. But the reality is, it's got to come from deep within. And you need a set of skills before you can even embark on networking. And if you can communicate, then that's the first sort of main thing. And if you're inquisitive, if you're
Mm-hmm.
interested, I'm interested in the world. I'm interested how people fit in the world, and I'm interested in what makes them tick. And
Yeah.
I don't ever want anyone to say, "You got me that job." I want to silently sit back and think, wow, that person's now in the World Bank. And I can remember getting them
Mm-hmm.
on their first graduate MBA program that started them on that journey. So I didn't get them there. I was just that little tiny push that made them go for something that maybe they normally wouldn't go for. So
Yeah.
I, I don't think I've answered your question, Maggie, but
No,
what
you
I'm saying
actually
is
have.
I'm all over the media, the networks, all the networking platforms, and it's second nature. You never switch off.
Right.
So when I'm sitting in that restaurant and I see that young exec, whether they're black or white, if they've got something about them, then I want to engage with them. I want them in the net in my network. I had called to have a plumber visit last week, and my husband happened to be home at the same time. And we have a stereotypical image, wrongly, of what a plumber should be like. But this guy was from Henley-on-Thames, which is a very
Mm.
nice part of Reading in the UK and in the Royal County of Berkshire. And he developed, so he'd got the skills of a plumber, but he also had developed networking. So there was this, what I'd say, quite posh gent who'd created a plumbing service where he was using networking, connecting, and communication to
Wow.
actually do the job of a standard plumber. But no way was he a standard plumber. Everybody who ever asks me now if they want a plumber, this guy from Henley will be recommended because
And those referrals are important.
yeah, he paid attention to detail, and
Yeah.
that's important.
Well, I think that's a great story and a terrific example. I also think, you you observed your mom. I am sure your sons have observed you, and when you say they've got it, I'm sure that that is part of the dynamic that has allowed them. And then they'll put their own spin and style on it, just as you have done, which is terrific. So here's a question that I think is kind of a big one. What's a mistake you see people make when they're trying to network, that actually kind of pushes connections away as opposed to really connecting and bonding them?
I think there's a number of mistakes that people make regularly, and which is why they fail at networking. I think whoever I'm talking to, whether it's the receptionist in a company, the cleaner who happens to walk by, that young graduate executive, or the chief exec, everyone gets treated the same way. But I see people in my network only that they're looking up. So
Mhm.
they don't value the little people. But I go back to my encounter with Dick in the House of Commons and how he made time for everybody. Right. Most people who network don't. They go to an event, they've got a
Yeah.
hundred business cards, they just throw them at you. They don't even engage. They're having a conversation. They're looking over their shoulder for who they think is more important. And I
Hmm.
think you have to be in the moment. So if you're developing your network, if you're at an event, whoever you encounter, you give them your all. You don't
Yeah.
stop the conversation with that person because you feel somebody more important has walked
Yeah.
past. Some of the most important people to me in my life are those that are on the first rung of the ladder. And I like telling stories, and I'll tell you a story. I've commuted to London for 40 years now, and every day I commuted, I cut through the hotel to get a taxi, and every day was the the guy who's at the front of a hotel,
The
and
doorman.
the doorman, sorry. The
Oh,
doorman. And every day I engaged with that doorman. I remember going through the hotel one, and he'd always told me that he really liked one of our female politicians, one of our black female politicians in the UK. One day I was coming out of a meeting and she was with me. And I said, no, we're not going to go to the normal taxi route. We're going to go through the hotel. I want you to meet somebody. And I introduced the doorman to what this female black politician, and it made his year. He
I'm
every
sure.
day I saw him after that. It took nothing for me to go a slightly different way, and it took nothing for that politician to give him 10 minutes of her time.
Yeah.
We were on our way to a meeting, we were late, but she gave that time, and so did I. So
It
when
means the
you're
world. It
it
does.
does. And when you're connecting, never skim, never dismiss somebody because they're not important enough. Everybody is important because
Yeah.
they're the cogs that allow you to do what you need to do. So if the doorman isn't there, you can't get your taxi. You
Yeah.
don't, so all these things all fit into the cog of networking.
Yeah. I've always said it's so important to establish relationships at all levels in an organization. It's not just key stakeholders or the senior tier. It's all the way through the organization. One quick side note is when people were really working in office, a Time Warner example, or actually in any of the companies I've worked for, when somebody would check in with the receptionist, and then they would let me know, and I'd go and greet the person. Usually I was interviewing them. After I escorted them out and said goodbye, I would always ask the receptionist, so what did you think? Because oftentimes their true colors would come out there, and then they had more of a show for me when they were
That
actually
is
speaking with me.
That's so important, Maggie, because it's about those first impressions. And I've seen people arrive at a reception desk with the most arrogant, bad attitude. And
Yeah.
they need to understand that that receptionist has probably been there 30 years, have saved everybody, has helped them do their job, sorted out problems. Never dismiss. No
Yeah.
one is above giving some extra time and go that extra mile.
Annmarie, to elaborate a little bit on the networking concept, um, how about some advice for somebody who might not have an established network or wants to build a network almost from scratch? What would your advice be to them about how to go about doing that?
I think developing a network can be quite daunting. And when I first developed my network, and um, I used to have to go into big rooms in London with people I didn't know. And my strategy was, right, you go in there and your strategy is to speak to three people, three
Ah,
people, three people where you can have a bit of a conversation. You can actually get a contact from them and you can give them your contact and make it small. Three interactions and keep that rule to every event you go to. And quite often somebody will go to an event and they don't want to stay for the whole event. So be honest. Let somebody know that you're coming to their networking event, but you're going to have to leave um, an hour in or an hour and a half in. And that gives you a bit of comfort that if it's uncomfortable or you're not feeling it, then you've always got a get out because you've told your host before. So the two clear pieces of advice: never go for hundreds of contacts, go for three real meaningful relations
powerful. Yeah.
or connections at each event, and also make sure you have a get out. Even if you're going to a dinner, I've been to dinners at the Mansion
Yeah.
House, the House of Lords, and it's nerve-wracking. But if you can say to yourself that you need to leave by a certain time, quite often you don't, but it's just there in case you do. So it's like a
I think
compass.
Yeah, it's a great safety net, especially if you're starting out with going to big events and wanting to. I love the let's like it's almost like take baby steps before you run. Let's like build it gradually. And so the first time might be three, maybe it's four the next time. But I would love for you to expand on this because someone who really hasn't had a lot of experience in networking, or like I said, has never really done that. For them to go cold up to someone that they don't know, do you have any tips for like icebreakers of how they can segue into a conversation so it's smooth and it doesn't look forced?
I think you have to be open and honest. And I think you have to approach somebody in the network to say, look, I don't normally come to events. I'm really nervous. You looked really interesting. I would like a conversation. And let them know who you are and what you do. The key is you've made your three contacts when you get home that night, not the next day or 3 days later. That night, you send three small emails to thank you for giving them your time, right? And I think that's really important. If you
Yeah.
wait, you've missed that opportunity. But every event I went to in London in the early days, three people followed up with an email that night. And you'd be amazed. Senior people from KPMG, Ernst & Young, Citibank would respond the next morning.
Yeah.
And that's your door to then have a bit more conversation. So you do have to just be honest and say, I'm not good at this, or I've not done this before, and be honest. People love that when you say
I
that.
I was just going to say, I think that people, just as humans, want to help other people. So to have that and maybe a little side of vulnerability, I think people want to lean in and make them feel comfortable, and then that just flows for a natural conversation. I also love the follow up. I think that sticks with people that receive them. And I don't know, it's kind of like the thank you. Um, I mean, I was always with everything I've done is a follow up, a thank you follow up, and I'm not sure that a lot of people do that anymore.
No, they
And
don't.
and so I think that would be a standout. That's really also great advice along with everything else you outlined there.
And the get out before you've even
Yes,
gone.
because you
Because
don't want to be perceived as rude to the host.
and it's a good grounding because there have been times when I've as confident as I am, sometimes it's overwhelming. You're at an event and, it can be overwhelming. And if you've got that get out, then it's a safety net. And,
Yeah.
and you'd be amazed. You don't often use it, but if you do, it's there.
Yeah,
So,
and a comfort level to doing something that you're not necessarily comfortable doing. So I think that's terrific. Brilliant. Again, great advice. Thank you so much for that one. So, as a search strategist, how would you identify exceptional talent that a traditional search methodology or process might overlook?
I suppose in a way, I'm always on it. So, like I said, I find a lot of my candidates who are under performing in role, not underperforming, they're not performing at the appropriate level to their skills and ability, but for whatever reason, they've not managed to get that right job on the right bit of the ladder. So I am always, I suppose, in a way, really sort of thinking about how execs can move up the ladder, but in a way that it is open and fair and equitable. So I don't think I've
Yeah.
answered your question. So maybe you come back and rephrase it and let me answer in a bit.
Okay. Well, I think one of the things is, and that I was trying to frame out here a little bit is, oftentimes in search there is kind of a formula. and some sort of science to the methodology about how you structure and target people. There is a methodology to it. And what you do layers on something so different that really is unique to
I'm
how you go
always,
about it.
yeah, I'm always looking for an executive in a place you wouldn't see. So some of
Yeah.
the execs I've placed in quite senior roles have been senior in another sector, but maybe not in the sector that they want to go into. And I'm always looking. I'm looking in railway stations, cafes, restaurants, when I meet somebody on the train. I'm
Yeah.
interested in people. So I never assume because that person is driving the cab that they're just a cab driver.
Your
Most cab
plumber is a
drivers,
perfect example.
well, most cab drivers in London have had careers, whether it be a blue collar or white collar. They've had
Mhm.
careers, they've done interesting things. So you talk to them, you see an exec, you get talking, they'll talk to you about their children, their family, and all of a sudden you've got the name of somebody in their family who really needs some career advice or help. So I find the head hunting industry elitist. I've been in it, I've seen it, and I want to be a headhunter that's different. And that's what I bring to the table. I can bring you a diverse shortlist by just looking in my phone.
Yeah. And I think you hit on something really powerful is being able to market and position transferable skills, because that's what's also going to be able to say, a lot of times you're saying, I want somebody that's done this exact same job with this exact same title for X number of years. And really, here's another individual. It broadens your diversity spectrum in terms of talent that you could introduce. So now let's get to the fashion bit. Um, so tell us about Continent Clothing and what pulled you after decades of coaching and leadership advisory towards co-founding, or actually founding, excuse me, and a fashion brand in the Gambia.
Well, again, I suppose when you started off the podcast, you asked me which country or culture I enjoyed the most, and I said it was Africa, and I said I'd put a pin in and ended up in Gambia. And the one thing I saw when I went to Gambia. In fact, when you go to most countries in Africa, people wear their traditional clothing. They wear, it's just bright, vibrant color everywhere. And everybody in Gambia wears traditional clothing.
Mm-hmm.
Occasionally, they'll be, if they're going to somewhere, they might wear some Western clothing, but I loved the colors. I loved the fabric. Where I live in the Gambia, all the tailors, there were tailors at the end of each row where I live. They were making beautiful things. And my kids were really into bright colored trousers. So they started having trousers made and making trousers. And then I started asking the tailors, where do you sell your clothes? And there was no route to market. And
Yeah.
if I'm honest with you, it's something, I suppose in a way it is full circle because I started in retail, but
Right. I
I
was going
was
to say that.
prompted, yeah, I was prompted because my son had left uni and he wanted to set up the fashion brand. And we did co-found it together. He drove the work in Gambia and I drove the designs and the ideas. It was quite collaborative. And I love it. But actually, in a way, it takes the training, education, recruit, all the things I've done in my career into a mini operation. We have 40 little tailor businesses. There are no factories in our production. We're one of the few brands that pay 50% of all of each contract up front. And what this means
Wow.
is that they know they don't have to worry about where they're going to get money from. They don't have to worry about getting paid. They can get on, do the contract. They've got money to pay their staff and everybody else. And when the contract is finished, my manager goes and picks it up and we pay on receipt. No other clothing company that I know.
No.
And the reason I do that is that Gambia is a poor country. And so many people come into the country, say, I want to do fashion, I want to have clothes made, will take up all the tailor's times, get on a plane, go to Holland, go to UK, go to America, and don't pay the tailor. I've seen it happen. So
Mm,
I want to be a brand that is ethical and that practices what it preaches. I know all my tailors, I know their families, and it is a business. They make a lot of money. They're
that's
working
right.
most of the time, but the way we've structured it is everybody wins. My customers win because they get an affordable item. My tailors win because we're paying them
Hmm.
money up front. They get paid for each item. So that is, I didn't answer the question as to why I set it up, but it was a natural evolution. We had the
Yeah.
home care, there's lots of need, there's lots of poverty, and it was a way to bring all of those together and give
Yeah.
people economic independence,
Yeah.
which I didn't want to do things to people in Africa. I wanted to be the spark that allowed them to become economically self-sufficient, and my tailors
Which
are.
is true. Yeah. And I think, that plays from your early story with, you build upon, the business aspects and the disciplines and the learning experience. I mean, I think all of this is just rolled up. It's in your DNA, to combine it all. So I can see, how that works. So my big question is like, clearly, your Annmarie Limited, with all of the coaching and executive search and leadership strategies, et cetera, is different than I'm sure some of the skill sets. But then you've already talked about how some of them are very crossover and similar. But how do you sometimes balance the different modes of operating? Are you just gifted at juggling 1,000 things at once?
No, no. I'm disciplined. So
Uh-huh.
um, Africa operates on a similar time zone. Gambia is never more than an hour apart from the UK. So I do all my continent clothing stuff. I'm an early riser between 7 and 10. I won't take a business UK call until 10 o'clock. So I never start any of my calls. It's a rarity. And I do my America calls and international calls after lunch. So I actually split my day into three. First bit, continent clothing shop online, any events or festivals. Then I do UK and any of my Africa clients because they're ahead of us. And
Hmm.
then I do America after lunch.
That is a brilliant
Does that really?
structure. Yeah.
No
Oh.
strategy or anything.
Well, let's talk a moment, if we may, about your brand and what you would envision your legacy to be. So, if a young professional came to you today asking for how to build the kind of network and reputation that you have, not for personal gain, but to do it in the way that you do it, what would you tell them?
I think you need to be prepared to give away your contacts and get
Mm,
nothing in return. And when I say get nothing in return, that's not true because I found that the more you give your contacts away to the right people, you get hundreds more contacts back in different ways. So I think you have to be selfless and
yeah.
give away your network and never ask your network. The amount of times I have somebody ring me up, I don't know them, will you mentor me? Will you coach me? Or I'm at an event and somebody says, I want you to coach me. And I'm being honest. I only mentor or coach people that I can build a rapport with. I don't just I won't just take on anybody. I've got a limited time to
Sure, sure,
operate. So if a young person comes, I want to see them connecting and giving away their network. And I don't want them asking for anything. I've never asked my network for anything. I've never asked anybody in my network for a contract. I've been given contracts and
sure.
awarded, and I've pitched for contracts, but you don't ask because you don't need to. If you give away enough, I'm I'm not religious, but I'm a firm believer in that
It
it comes
comes back.
and it really
I I'm a big believer in that as well. Um, so what do you hope people will say about you years from now, when they think about the connections that you made for them?
and this is off the wall. It's got nothing to do with connection or networking, that she had a sense of humor and she
Uh,
was right. Because I believe whatever you do, you've got to do it with a sense of humor. You can't take yourself too seriously. And you've got to bring fun into whatever you're doing, whether it's a conversation, interaction. You know, Maggie, we've been friends for a long time. We work hard, but we also like to have fun.
Absolutely. And just to, because we've kind of threaded him through our entire conversation today, it was fascinating. I learned something terrific from Dick Parsons. He would always have, here are the three key business drivers that we as an enterprise need to focus on for this calendar year. And so we're all pointing to the same North Star. And at the end of everything that he put together with these really powerful business, goals and objectives, it would always end with and dot, 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 have fun.
There
So
you
I
go.
thought that should be our signature, I think, between the two of us. I think that is,
Well,
but
we've always had fun, Maggie. I think
yeah,
that um, fun and a sense of humor carries a relationship a long,
yeah,
long way for a
I
long
think
time.
so too. So, and I don't know if just spontaneously the answer to this, but what do you think maybe is your next pivot? I know you said that you've constantly pivoted throughout your trajectory. Is there something that you haven't done that kind of pulls you towards it?
Again, completely different from anything I've done before. Um, you visited my house, and at the back of my house is an old gravel pit that is now a lake of not quite triple scientific interest, but it's on its way. The opportunity to buy that lake has come up. And where I live, 10 of the houses have put together, and we're about, fingers crossed, to buy a lake. And the reason I want the lake is you probably don't know that I'm actually a secret gardener, and I'm a pot gardener and have about 500 pots of different sizes with plants in. I also have a wildflower garden, and I
Okay.
plan to go round the lake with a few of my neighbours and create a wildflower retreat for all the people who live near where I live to be able to walk around the lake and enjoy it with wildflowers. So that really
And
is a pivot.
I think that's fantastic. And once again, in theme with everything you do, it's all about giving and the gift to others. And even the way you look at that. But no, I think one of the things I'm always attracted and impressed with and I'm drawn to are people that are multidimensional and that have a variety of interests. It's that movie where there's types, it's all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy. And having the variety of this, I think, is very exciting. And you walk the talk and live the talk, and it's just it's very exciting to see.
Thank
So,
you.
as we kind of start winding down, um, and this has been absolutely incredible, and I'm so excited about carrying this on to part two and part three. I think there was a little teaser, or as Taylor Swift might say, an Easter egg in there with one of our guests in part two or three that you kind of alluded to. And I'm very excited about those individuals. And I think it'll take the whole conversation to just new heights and a new level. But to wrap up properly, let's have some fun, speaking of which, and add a little additional texture to our conversation. So, with that said, I would like to end with a rapid fire round. Are you ready?
I'll try.
Okay. What is one word that describes a great connector?
Selfless.
Ooh, I like that. Best piece of advice you ignored before taking?
Price your worth. I've
Ooh,
never, I never priced myself at what I should because I wanted to do the work. And somebody early on in, well, when I moved into the corporate world said, you have to price your worth. So
I love that. What is the connection that you have made that you are most proud of? And you've
I
already
think
been,
I think I mentioned it. It is you, Maggie, and the link to Dick Parsons. And then if I have to have one person that's not related to Maggie, it would be Andrew Rashbash, former
uh,
CEO of The Economist, Reuters, and Euromoney.
and you've had such great success stories with him, and it's been a long-standing, incredible relationship rapport. So I think that's terrific, and I am very honored to be on your list. I just want you to know. And I didn't set that question up twice just to hear it again, but I'm honored. And lastly, what is one word that you would this is my favorite one, okay? This is a perfect way to tie it up with a bow with our conversations. What is one word that you would use to describe the fabulous brand that is Annmarie?
Energy.
I like that.
Yeah. You have
You
to have
you have
energy,
endless energy.
yeah,
I
to
can
do work.
attest to that. Oh my gosh. Annmarie, this has just been extraordinary. Talk about fun. I have had the most wonderful time having the opportunity to chat with you and share notes. And you just have so much wisdom to bring to the table. And I know that our listeners are very much going to be able to appreciate your words of wisdom and advice and guidance and examples. I think anytime you can share those stories to back up what you're saying, it really brings it to life. So this has been extraordinary, and I'm very, very, very excited. And just as a reminder to all of our listeners, part two and three will have us, Annmarie and myself, joined by some extraordinary talent in Annmarie's global network to take today's conversation to new heights. So I hope everyone who's listening has enjoyed and gained some new perspective from this episode. I hope everybody has a terrific rest of your day, and please remember to like, follow, and subscribe. So until next time.